My name is Ntanda Mandui. I am a digital media specialist.
Victoria Rubadiri. I'm a broadcast journalist from Nairobi, Kenya.
My name is Andrew Kyamegero. I'm from Uganda.
Hi there, my name is Asanele Kutu and I'm reporting for FPNN News from Cape Town.
To talk about an issue, a topic that I'm absolutely passionate about at the intersection of family planning.
So I want to know more about it. What is pronatalism?
It's high time we have the men and the boys part of the conversation.
That shift of power, right? So from the central kind of space of donors who hold the money, who are the decision makers, to now the beneficiaries.
We should be prioritizing sexual pleasure as a normal, inherent part of healthy sexual lives.
For us to have a healthy baby, we need to have a healthy pregnancy.
How do they all fuse together to let us achieve sustainable development goals and the universal health coverage?
Everybody who's passionate about this cause and everyone who's passionate about this topic deserves to have a say, a voice, and to be able to amplify the voices of those who cannot be here today and who need it the most.
And so it's been like for many of us, it's been a long struggle where we've been standing on the sidelines.
I'm committing to telling more stories around family planning.
And how once you share the story, other people find themselves in your story. That connection is really, really powerful.
FPNN is not just a platform that exists when ICFP is on. This is a movement.
It's a conversation that's going to be going on, the ones in Latin America, in Asia, we have those in America, we have those in Africa.
Here representing people who are very vulnerable. They don't have access to these spaces. So let's make sure whatever we're committing to, whatever we're saying on the podium and say, I'm going to do this, let's follow through.
It's going to get interesting. Keep it right here on FPNN.
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 Let's be a part of the conversation.
Thank you.
And see you in a bit.
Bye.
Hello, the world, and welcome to yet another great conversation. Ladies and gentlemen, esteemed journalists, ICFP fellas, we have passionate content creators who are joining us for this conversation. We have influential community leaders. Welcome to this groundbreaking forum where we're diving into the nexus of the crucial topics that intertwine the fate of our planet and the well-being of the future generations. Today, we embark on an exciting journey to explore the dynamic interplay between climate change, family planning, sexual and reproductive health rights, and so much more. My name is Andrew Kyamegero from Uganda here, and I'm an FPNN fella from the very first time we started it to where we are today. And as we stand at the crossroads of the environment challenges and the well-being, the urgency to understand and report the linkages between these two crucial conversations has never been much more crucial than now. And that said, over the next few minutes, we will not only unravel the intricate connections, but also empower you with insights and tools to communicate these issues effectively to your diverse audiences. So before we plunge into the heart of a conversation, let's take a moment to glance at the global stage, particularly the upcoming COP28 that is coming up. Now, this pivotal gathering serves as a beacon of hope to people like me and you, and where nations unite to address the climate change and forge pathways towards a sustainable future. So in this conversation, we're going to provide you with quite an overview of how the COP28 is organized, the key players, and the most importantly, where you can actively engage in the transformative conversations by the end of this. Dear participants, this is not your ordinary webinar or meeting or Zoom meeting, no. This is a celebration of knowledge, a birthday of awareness, and a commitment to the collective responsibility we hold for our planet. Expect a lively and engaging session that not only informs, but also inspires action. And that said, today for me to do this and more, I'm going to have quite a lot more things that are going to help us understand this. With us at FPNN, we're post-reporting to climate and SRHR content hub that will distribute it to the ICFP community and the FPNN network. And the lists are quite big. It goes to 50K plus. The interview support as FPNN, we're very available to make connections for expert interviews. So if you're across the globe and you have access to this space, please link us to the best experts to be part of these conversations. And as well, we have content hub and briefing pages providing resources and past reporting for background and inspiration. And notwithstanding that we offer media briefing on key FP, that is family planning, and sexual reproductive health rights, events and reports throughout the year, and provide them with journalists to inspire their reporting. That it's not just inspirational and engaging, but rather transformative in a way. That said, ladies and gentlemen, I want to welcome you to this great occasion, the COP 2028, just so you know that it's the annual climate conference. And this serves as a formal meeting. It's going to take place this time around in the Middle East, that is United Arab Emirates. That's where it's going to be. And what are the COP 28 goals? One, it's to identify solutions for limiting global temperatures rising to 1.5 degrees, to inform countries and preparations for national climate plans due by 2025. Again, it's going to accelerate the green transition. The green transition, we've seen the renewable energy conversation, we've seen the green economy, the green cars. This conversation is going to be very crucial. And just to remind you that it's as well looking at achieving the delivery of the Paris Agreement goals. To those of you who remember the Paris Agreement goals that were committed to by some countries, some, they fulfilled what they promised. Others, they never fulfilled a thing. Now, we're going to look at the delivery of the Paris Agreement goals. It's a conversation that is going to give us quite a lot more, and where the conversations are happening, we are happening there. So the 28th focus days, that is the COP28, we're going to have on 3rd December. It's a health day, and 4th December is a gender day. Please note this on your calendar, that you don't get it this twisted. Social media virtues, we'll have conversations and programming on social media platforms being tagged with COP 28, Climate SRHR. Please note that our conversation is looking at the integration of these two key elements, the sex, reproductive health and rights, and climate change. And the other one will be FP for all. And the blue zone is a zone for the official sessions. Now, meetings, side events, and the press conferences will be taking place in the blue zone. So only party delegates, if you know that you're part of the party delegates or head of state or admitted observers and accredited press, you'll be in that space. In the green space, it's an open space for all the public, for the youth, representatives, artists, businesses, regional, as well as the local decision makers to exchange ideas and solutions for the net zero future. So that is what the green zone will be looking about. We have the blue zone. It's typically top-notch kind of executive people who will be there, and those were created to be there. So that is the COP 2028, just so you know about it. And the National Climate Action Planning is equally on. The NDC, or the National Determined Contribution, is a climate action plan that is cutting emissions and adapt to climate impacts. And this is meant to update every 5 years. So the last 5 years, what was it like and how is it today? In the recent report of UNFPA, the report showed that only 38 of the 199 countries reviewed have integrated sexual and reproductive health and rights into their national climate action plans, or NDCs. So when you see that they have moved, but the journey is still going on because we have only 38 out of 199, it shows you the gap that needs to be bridged. And one of the goals of COP 2028 is to help inform preparations for the National Climate Actions Plans due 2025. As and when it will be happening, we'll be there. I pray that you attend in that very summit so that you can make sense of it. Now, we're starting off this conversation today. My panel is blessed to have great speakers, experts in the field who are ready to share their wisdom, and we encourage you, our vibrant audience, to participate actively. And just to remind you that this is not just a forum, it's a platform for collaboration where journalists, media fellows, content creators, community influencers are converging to amplify the vital messages about climate change and SHR. So buckle up for a very exhilarating kind of a ride through the realms of knowledge and advocacy. And to start off, I have Sono Aibe. This is a gender and climate expert who is joining us today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, Sono. Are you there?
Yes. Hi, thank
Kindly
you,
introduce
Andrew.
yourself more.
Sure. Hello, everyone. My name is Sono Aibe, and I have spent over 30 years advocating for family planning and related gender and health issues. And I love interlinking those with environment and broader development sectors. So today, I have 3 points that I wanted to emphasize as we talk about SRHR and climate linkages. So first, how are SRHR and climate linked? Well, the slogan you hear often now is climate change is not gender neutral. So extreme heat, sea level rise, storms, droughts, and other unprecedented weather events are heavily threatening the health and rights of women and girls who are already vulnerable due to their lower socioeconomic status and also discrimination. And I would say that their bodies are definitely built differently from those of men and boys, and they have traditional roles in the household and in their communities that include oftentimes caregiving of dependents, food preparation, cleaning, fetching water and firewood, and so on, which differ from male roles. So climate change is really a multiplier of existing health vulnerabilities and disparities. For women and girls who already have poor access to health services, those services will get even more disrupted and could become completely inaccessible during climate disasters. For example, many women in remote and marginalized communities are already giving birth without much needed medical support. So what happens when there's a flood and they need to evacuate? Who takes care of them? What about access to regular contraceptive supplies? Another example is menstruation. Women and girls' ability to manage their menstrual hygiene is impaired when there's a lack of clean and safe water due to prolonged droughts. And displacement from their homes due to climate disasters increases risks of gender-based violence and child marriage. So realizing universal access to SRHR is crucial to achieving gender equality. These represent SDGs 3 and 5, as you know, and these in turn must be central to gender-aware and gender-responsive climate policies and financing. Now, I have a slide that is not for me to walk through right now, but it is mainly for you to look at later about how climate change can directly impact SRHR. So please take a look afterwards. The second point I was going to make today is that in consultation with those most impacted by the climate crisis, funders for climate adaptation and resilience should be open to supporting health interventions, including essential SRH services and addressing sexual and gender-based violence. So this year, as Andrew said, COP28 is finally featuring a health day on December 3rd. And this is, of course, an excellent opportunity for us to monitor conversations about climate and health and climate and gender as well. But at COP, you will likely notice that there's going to be a chronic omission of gender in the climate and health conversations, and omission of health in the climate and gender conversations. And SRHR will likely not appear in many places, if at all. As reporters and influencers, you could inquire as a start whether gender disaggregated data of health impacts on climate is being collected routinely and whether climate impacts unique to women and girls' health will be financed by climate donors. If we're serious about gender equality, these are very important questions to ask. For example, many researchers have been studying how extreme heat is adversely impacting pregnant women and birth outcomes. This should lead to creating solutions when designing resilient health systems and building protective infrastructures, and with women and these newborns' needs in mind. Climate financing in general, of course, is falling far short of targets. So we must join advocates to call for the re-examination of spending priorities, as well as ensuring any additional funding is reaching the most impacted and addressing their forgotten needs. Third, the climate crisis is threatening decades of work on SRHR, gender equality, and health system strengthening. So if we continue to work in silos, we will not be able to reach our goals. There's a development practice called PHE, Population, Health, and Environment, which has a long history of implementing integrated sexual reproductive health, environmental conservation, and livelihood programs in many parts of the world. This kind of programming breaks us out of our sectoral silos. It also responds more holistically to interlinked community needs, and it results in cost efficiencies through partnerships. We need to call for these programs and funding support that allow for multi-sectoral problem solving to increase community resilience towards climate change. And for more information about these programs, you can visit knowledgesuccess.org and search the term PHE for further information. So in conclusion, SRHR and climate linkages are very complex and really cannot be summarized in a tight soundbite. But we need more than ever now to respond to the fact that climate change affects women and girls disproportionately. And SRHR, as part of universal healthcare access, is a central component to building climate resilience worldwide. Let's make sure that the most affected people are invited to decision-making tables and also are fully funded to attend such policy and financing discussions. Thank you for listening.
Wow, amazing, amazing. I wish I could send you a round of applause or something of the sort, but thank you so much, Sono Aibe. That is amazing. I just love the fact that you bring it so clearly that we should not work in silos. Working in isolation just exacerbates the problem even much more bigger. See, anyone in this space, if you didn't come with a notebook, you're missing out. Joining for this conversation and even to take us more deeper into population, climate change, and reproductive rights. We have Nandita Bajaj, the Executive Director, Population Balance International. She's a Senior Lecturer, Institute for Human ED, as well as Antioch University, to take us through this population, climate change, and reproductive health. Over to you, Nandita.
Thank you so much, Andrew, for having me. And thank you for that excellent introduction, Sono. So today I'll be bringing attention to the most overlooked aspect of climate change, and that is the topic of population and its connection to reproductive rights, climate change, and all other ecological and social crises we're experiencing. As Andrew has introduced me already, but today for the outline, I'm going to briefly cover the history of human expansionism, how climate change and SRHR, sexual and reproductive health and rights, are connected, and how we must confront both the denial of the population factor and the concept of pronatalism, which I will introduce in that section. So, a brief history of population trends. Here, I'm going to start by looking at the last 10,000 years of human history. The rapid expansion of the human enterprise is actually a recent phenomenon. For 99.9% of human existence, which spans back 300,000 years, the whole population of the world remained less than 5 million. That's the population of the city where I live now, Toronto, is 5 million. That was the entire world's population. And you can see that it took us 10,000 or 300,000 years to reach the first billion, which happened in 1800. And then in just 200 years, our population grew from 1 billion to 8 billion. And scientists actually call this current blip in our 300,000-year history as Homo sapiens an aberration. And the reason we were allowed to expand the way we did in the last 200 years was the discovery of fossil fuels, which allowed us to exploit nature in a way we had never done before. And as a result, the current epoch where we find ourselves is called the Anthropocene, because humans basically have dominated the planet and decimated most other life on Earth at our own peril. Next, I will talk about ecological overshoot. According to the Global Footprint Network, we are currently demanding 75% more from the planet than it can support sustainably. Meaning we don't have another 0.75 of the planet. It just means we are stealing, literally, resources from future generations, children, grandchildren, and other generations. Climate change, which is today's topic, is only one aspect of ecological overshoot. It gets the most attention, but it's not the only ecological catastrophe we're facing. We have biodiversity loss, species extinction, extreme toxification of the planet, soil erosion, ocean acidification, and many more crises that are all aspects of ecological overshoot. And that demand on the planet that we're placing is a product of both our growing numbers and our skyrocketing consumption. In fact, over the last 200 years, when we grew from 1 billion to 8 billion, our population grew by a factor of 8, and our consumption increased by a factor of 100. So if you go to the next slide, you'll see that this growth has been unequally distributed, both in population and in consumption. And that is what makes it a complex issue. The hyper-consumerism of the rich countries has played a huge role in outsourcing the ecological degradation onto the global majority, both through our extractive practices, as well as other climate change impacts, some of which Sono talked about. But now we're seeing troubling trends of this lifestyle taking root in other countries around the world. And we know that reducing consumption is profoundly challenging, and the global consumption trend for the last 50 years has only been increasing. And yet it must be done. But also human beings at all levels of consumption are negatively impacting the planet in different but equally destructive ways. And that is why the question of whether the problem is population or consumption is the wrong question. That's a false dichotomy. Both aspects need to be addressed. And that's what I'll be going into next. So in fact, according to the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, of the 129 countries that are projected to experience an increase in drought exposure, mainly due to climate change over the next few decades, 61, half of them, will do so largely due to population growth. The other one, IPCC, which is the most authoritative body on climate change, has identified population and consumption as the strongest drivers of climate change. So it's irrefutable that population and consumption both play a role in driving not just climate change, but all of our other social and ecological crises. But population has fallen out of favor as a discussion point, and that is really what I'm bringing today. So Sono actually nicely described the climate change impacts on sexual and reproductive health and rights, but I will very quickly introduce some further aspects and how that relates to population. So 80 of the most vulnerable countries in the world right now have a population growth that is 2 times the global average. These countries also have extremely poor gender equality index and are also most vulnerable to climate change shocks. How it relates to sexual and reproductive health and rights is these kinds of climate crises further lead to an increase in child marriage rates, the birth rates among adolescents, intimate partner violence as things become more desperate in society, water collection burden, which is borne primarily by women. So 80% of water collection in these countries is done by women. And maternal mortality rates go up, which is something Sono mentioned, and the unmet contraception needs go up, again, as priorities shift and people kick into survival mode. So women and girls often get left behind in this equation. So next, I will talk about how Project Drawdown, which is the foremost body that recommends the top 100 climate solutions, identifies family planning and population reduction through access to right-based voluntary family planning, universal high-quality education as the 3rd most powerful climate solution. So out of the top 100 solutions, family planning is identified as the 3rd most powerful solution, yet our politicians, our leaders, our climate change policymakers are not paying attention to this key aspect of climate change mitigation strategy. Next, I'll talk about the issue of population denialism. Why has population as a factor to our crises fallen out of favor? So there are 4 aspects of it. The first one, there is this ideology, primarily came out of the West, US really, that endless economic growth is not only possible, but desirable. And it's an ideology that we have now exported to other parts of the world, where we're trying to convince everybody that economic growth is the most important aspect of societal success, a country's success, and that without that, nothing else can really be elevated. The next one is human exceptionalism, the idea that we are superior to all of nature, all of the non-human beings, and they simply exist as resources to serve us. Therefore, we can continue to grow our enterprise, keep extracting and keep decimating all of the other non-human world just for our own benefit. Except, of course, the reason it's a fallacy is because we cannot exist without nature. The third one, which is very, very popular right now in climate change debates, is technological fundamentalism, a belief that technology will save us. We are so intelligent, we are such ingenious species that we can simply geoengineer our way out of our climate crisis, not recognizing that it's a lot of technological fundamentalism that has led us to this place, to this crisis in the first place. And the last one is pronatalism, which is a new concept I'll introduce, the sociocultural pressures to reproduce for external agendas. That's the one I'm going to focus most on today because our topic is SRHR. So pronatalism, by definition, this is from an author, Laura Carroll. The idea that parenthood and raising children should be the central focus of every person's adult life. It is a strong social force and includes a collection of beliefs so embedded that they've come to be seen as true. So to make it clear, pronatalism is this social bias toward having children, and it's based on the premise that the drive to have children is universal. Discussing pronatalism is not an attack on parenthood or procreative decision-making, but rather pronatalism is a form of oppression that institutions use to exploit people's capacity to reproduce as a means to other ends. And we can see what those other ends are. So if you go to the next slide, most people don't realize that because of thousands of years of patriarchy and coercive pressures to bear children, efforts to increase birth rates go back literally 10,000 years, which is when patriarchy is believed to have begun. And they are far more pervasive than pressures or any efforts to reduce birth rates. Efforts to reduce birth rates is really what made population a bad topic for people, especially because there were a few policies that violated people's reproductive rights through forced programs, such as forced sterilization and abortion and China's one-child policy. However, those are the exceptions to population policies, not the norm, and yet they get the most attention. So pronatalism shows up in a lot of ways. It shows up in the form of religious, cultural pressures through media, family, traditions, religious pressures to grow the institution to get more followers, more consumers through corporations, our economic leaders, so we can continue to mindlessly consume and grow the economy, and political pressures to get more taxpayers, military, and sometimes driven by ethnocentric ideology that we need to outnumber certain tribe or certain ethnicity. And some of the most intense pressures actually come from family, where inability or refusal to bear children can lead to disownment, domestic violence, divorce, social stigmatization, and negative economic consequences. Here you see a slide that actually shows what it looks like in the headlines for pronatalism. Different countries trying different type of coercive measures to ensure that people have children, whether by canceling family planning programs, whether by giving baby bonuses, or by stigmatizing people who are having fewer or no children. Next, I will show you these, a different kind of depopulation alarmism that is currently happening, especially in countries that are experiencing declining fertility rates. And fertility rates are declining because women have more autonomy. And yet, as you can see here, with these three different men are sounding alarms about what it means for economy, for their ethnicity and their country, that women are not having enough children. Elon Musk is blaming access to abortion and birth control for declining fertility, that feminism is the root cause of what he calls population collapse. Viktor Orban is afraid that Christianity is under threat because women are not producing enough Hungarian children. And so I'll leave it at that. And with my final slide, I'd just like to end things off by saying this graph from the UN shows three possible trajectories for population growth. The middle one being business as usual, and then the top one being if our fertility goes up by half a child or the bottom one goes down by half a child. And the difference is billions of people by the end of the century. And so this is why it's important for folks like us to make population a central justice issue by confronting and negating pronatalism so that we can actually elevate reproductive autonomy and gender equity, but also increase children's welfare as well as ecological and planetary justice. I will leave it at this. There are many different resources that are available for you to learn more about our work. I run the Overpopulation podcast where you can learn more about this. And I offer media stuff, media outlet advocacy, and a graduate course that you can learn more about from our website. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Nandita. Kindly follow Population Balance on Twitter and much more. They have all these conversations coming up. I love the fact that we have gone to pronatalism, but we have embedded that conversation through Nandita to the global leaders today, the ones that are setting the narratives today. And our speakers are really digging deep to give us equally more of this conversation. So for Population Balance resources, that's what you have right there. You can catch up with them and please acquaint yourself with more of this information, because every other day, every other time, we keep learning. Now, that was Nandita for my speakers. Those who are just joining in, this is going to be my very third speaker. We are 37 minutes into this conversation. We have Sadia Rahman, a youth advocate for SRH and climate action, and we're looking at the youth engagement in climate solution. Sadia.
Thank you so much, Andrew, and to Nandita and Sono for sharing these insightful informations. I think now I'm going to talk about young people, and it's very good to see that young people are being engaged in different forums, and sometimes it's intentional, sometimes it's not, but we need the young people on board because 20% of world population is young people. So, and whenever we are talking about climate change, sexual and reproductive health and rights is one of the major issues that gets impacted whenever an individual is impacted by climate change. I know climate change is when I had started working, or I was in school, I used to read about climate change, and there was lots of climate change will happen, and if these things are not changed, this might happen. So there was a lot of might and will and future tenses that I used to read. But now, if we talk about climate change, it's happening like now, and as it's happening now, it's impacting the 25% of young people of the world. And so it's really important that we talk about the interlinkages of SRHR and climate change, that is, and it's focusing young people. And when I'm talking about young people, is one of the major thing is young people's youth organizing power. So it's not just a concept, it is a force that has the potential to shape and redefine our world. The energy, innovation, and determination that the youth bring to the table are unparalleled, and it is our responsibility to harness this power and channel it towards creating positive change. And if now I turn our attention to the Asia Pacific region, because I'm from Bangladesh, and I have started as an youth activist from Bangladesh and working around youth SRHR, and now I work with Family Planning 2030. We are a global movement for family planning. So if we see in the Asia Pacific region, which is one of the largest region in the world, we find ourselves at the front line of climate change. the impacts that are not distant threats but daily realities for millions. And it is here that the intersectionalities of sexual and reproductive health and rights and climate change becomes glaringly apparent, and the vulnerabilities of communities, particularly the young people, are increased by climate induced challenges. And as we address these issues, it is upon governments and stakeholders to identify, disseminate and advocate for innovative service delivery models that is tailored to climate affected areas. I can share one of the experiences that I got when working in one of the coastal belts of Bangladesh, where I encountered to a young lady who was she was an unmarried 13 years old who was taking birth control pills because she couldn't manage her menstruation, because she mostly uses clothes, and she can't wash those clothes in the saline water that she can access. So she doesn't have access to fresh water for to drink, and to manage her wash. It's all she's surrounded by saline water. So to manage how she can't, so she knows that she can't manage her menstruation. That's why she is an unmarried young 13-year-old, and she's taking birth control pills. And in a society in Bangladesh, and if a unmarried young girl is taking birth control pills, it's not a thing they accept. And I don't know the what would be the long-term impact in her sexual and reproductive life in future. So we must recognize that the youth are not just victims, but they are also agents of change, that if I can mention, and their resilience, creativity, and adaptability are invaluable assets in crafting solutions. And as we are attending COP28, there are lots of youth leaders also present in COP28. There are world leaders, and there are different stakeholders that are present today in COP28. So let us renew our commitments to working hand in hand with the youth, listening to their voices and integrating their perspective into policy frameworks. Because if it's not the young people talking for themselves, it cannot be an inclusive approach and timely policies in place. Also, in addition, we can never overlook the importance of data disaggregation. It cannot be overstated. We need to ensure that age-specific and essential adolescent and youth indicators are not overlooked. This data-driven approach will enable us to design targeted interventions, and we really need to measure progress effectively and guarantee that no one is left behind. And so there are thousands of shining examples of resilience and innovation where local initiatives have become the reason of hope. So let us learn from these experiences and replicate successful models, and amplifying their impact on a broader scale. I would say there are youth organizations that are working on the ground, and government and NGOs and different agencies should come hand in hand to kind of work with young people as equal partners. Because it's been, so we'll hit ICPD 30 next year, and if we say there has been no significant progress around young people's SRHR, so maybe if we think really closely what we did wrong or what we could have done right, maybe young people who are the driving forces of today's time, they haven't been included as equal partners. So if we can have these young people as equal partners, we can have data and adolescent and youth friendly indicators in place to measure, and we can have different kind of innovative models and service delivery models that can reach the climate vulnerable youth, and we can have young people on the table with the policy makers and having those constructive discussions that what they need and how they do it, and then ending up doing it together. And I think this is the way that we should be following from this COP28 or from now on. Otherwise, there could be COP 58. Maybe I don't know if we can survive till COP 58, but there won't be any other solution than this if we overlook these indicators and don't have adolescent and young people in place. So I would say my summary of my representation today would be having young people in place, having data, and also working hand in hand to collecting innovative approaches to tackle climate change and SRHR, and so we can end the unmet need for family planning among adolescent and young people, and in climate vulnerable areas, and also in different aspects that is happening in right now in the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Sadia. Can't thank you enough. You know, you were speaking and it just took a moment to reflect. Have we integrated these programming? Have we integrated the strategies at the different layers of leadership, be it national, be it regional, be it continental, global? Have we integrated it? And it's very alarming. It's a conversation we need to have. And thank you so much. Ladies and gentlemen, it's just 47 minutes past 5 p.m. And me, I'm the next, and I'm going to present to you something to do with the involvement of men and boys. So I have an organization, it's called Omuntu Wawansi, and under this we have what we call the Man Cave UG. It's a program that meets and engages men and boys to, in a way, understand that patriarchy has its pros and cons, but where we stand, where I am in Africa, it actually has more cons than the pros. And as such, as we're gathering today, and not just as advocates of climate change or reproductive health, but as architects of a transformative narrative for the future. Now, our pursuit of a sustainable planet and thriving societies, it's imperative that we engage the men at the different layers. So the role of men and boys in the intersection of climate change and sexual reproductive health and rights is quite very unique. We are standing at unprecedented environmental challenging times, and it's very crucial to recognize that the men and boys are not merely bystanders in this narrative. They are integral contributors and beneficiaries of sustainable future. Now, according to the World Health Organization, engaging men in reproductive health initiatives leads to healthier families. And while a report by the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change underscores that gender-sensitive approaches rather much more crucial, rather essential in combating climate change effectively. So statistics speak louder than words. Let the numbers illuminate our pathway. Let me just take you down the road. Over 80% of the world's energy consumption is driven by men. If you didn't know, now you know. 80% of the world's energy consumption is driven by men. Acknowledging this fact is very pivotal in crafting climate policies that resonate with the demographic most responsible for shaping our energy landscape. 2, in many regions, men often hold decision-making positions within families. Engaging them in discussions about family planning and SHR is a strategic approach in influencing what I could term as household dynamics positively. Now, this aligns quite a lot of things. It aligns the interest, it helps us foster meaningful engagement, and we must align the interests of boys and men with the broader goals of climate resilience and reproductive health, because this helps us to align the key pillars. And the key pillars for me are health and well-being. By this, I mean we need to emphasize the direct impact of climate change on male reproductive health, the rising temperatures, pollution, and the ecological shifts that can affect fertility, overall, the well-being of the family. Then 2, it is the economic prosperity. So highlighting the economic benefits of a sustainable practice, a green economy not only safeguards the planet, but also creates opportunities for livelihoods. And later, this aligns with the aspirations of men seeking economic stability. Women equally are embraced in the same ecosystem, and both homes have a sustainable household income. And three, this is another pillar, it's empowerment and equality. We need to advocate for gender equality as a pathway to a sustainable future. See, when men and boys actively participate in these discussions of climate change and sex and reproductive health discussions, it fosters an environment of equality and shared responsibility. So there comes with the responsibility as well, and accountability. Notwithstanding, to truly engage men and boys, we must break down the social norms and stereotypes. Time and again in my country, Uganda, I keep challenging the preconceived notions about masculinity, fostering an environment where open dialogue on reproductive health and climate change not only accepted but are celebrated. That is something very crucial. We need to look at the educational initiatives. We need to implement comprehensive educational programs that integrate these two conversations, climate change and reproductive health. Once we equip men and boys with this knowledge and tools, they'll make informed decisions about their reproductive health, and they'll help the women equally run the race of their visions. So in conclusion, engaging men and boys is not just an ethical imperative, but I rather feel it's a strategic necessity as we navigate the complex terrain of climate change and reproductive health. So I strongly believe that we need to forge a path that is inclusive, equitable, and embraces the collective responsibility of all genders. I believe that once the ecosystem is all encompassed and it's moving well, we can shape a future where the empowerment of boys and men is synonymous with the resilience of our planet and the well-being of generations to come. Thank you. So we're going to go into a questions and answers section. Please use the question and answer feature to ask your questions, and that is in the in the chat box, I guess. So in the chat box there, you can ask a question, and while you're asking the questions, please let us know who is that question directed to. Is it to Nandita? Is it to Sono? Or is it to Sadia? Who is it? If you have any questions for the panelists, kindly post them in the Q&A feature and we'll be in position to respond to them. But nonetheless, we appreciate you so much for being here. And I want to give that like 1 or 2 minutes. Do you have any questions there? Do we have any questions? Let me check. Q&A.
Does not look like there's any questions yet, but we'll keep monitoring.
Okay. Thank you so much, Matt. So if you'd like to connect with an expert from today's session, please let us know that we can help facilitate that conversation to move forward. As FPNN Media, we have this part of a key job is to make sure that we align and we give you the information you need as and when it comes. Lorette Chichuza says, how exactly can we get men and boys to embrace equality with girls and women? I think that is directed to me. And then the other question says, how can young people step in SRHR design a small initiative to lead policy? This will actually go to Son, I think. So I'm going to answer the very first one, that of Laurent. How exactly can we engage men and boys to embrace equality? So this is what I've seen, Laurent, in my country. So I come from a country that is patriarch, that is one. Secondly, we're a moralist country, is Uganda. And in East Africa, we are the country where if you've lacked morals, they send you to Uganda. And this is what I've seen, even the other countries across Africa where I've gone. our culture connotations and religious alignments are the ones that actually break this. So the best way to engage men and boys to understand the aspect of equality, we need to find partnership and collaboration between culture institutions and religious leaders, because those two are the core informants that men listen to without questioning: religious leaders and culture leaders. So if we onboard them and we give them information that is simple to be understood by their audiences, bit by bit, we'll be in position to get there. So what does that mean? That entails training the culture leaders and training the religious leaders on this particular information of equality, and making sure that the landscape is safe and sound. Once you've onboarded them, then it will be easier for the men and boys to be in position to practice this in their spaces, and later they'll be in position to build a team or a cluster of champions within their spaces. The second question, that is about the young people taking space in how can the young people take step in SRH and policy? I want to pass over this question to my colleague that was before me. Possibly she has a better answer. I want to call in Sadia. Sadia, do you mind responding to this question, please?
I think there's a simple answer to this question, that we create those platforms from young people where they can come from the very grassroots level and share their lived experiences, and they have this platform where they have a dialogue with the policymakers, because policymakers, when they are sitting at the very top, they get to see a lot of clear scenario, but with a lived experience, they can also place it like what they need actually at the ground. So starting with establishing those platform could be the first stone in the process, and then having smart advocacy approaches to advocate with the policymakers, and having other stakeholders like UN agencies. There are other CSO organizations, they are working around SRHR and climate change. So engaging in those national and regional and then global platforms would get us to the point that we really want to reach.
Amazing. Thank you so much. There was another question that actually, the other question was like, okay, I think these were all answered. These were all answered. How exactly? Okay, I think it has been answered. Thank you so much. This was going to Sadia. Thank you so much for those questions. In case there are no other questions, friends, we just have like 2 minutes to wrap this up. I want to appreciate each and every one of you for being a part of this conversation. I can't thank you enough, and just remind you that FPNN supports journalists with story and coverage distribution, and just remind you as well that FPNN will post reporting to the Climate Change and SRHR Content Hub, and will distribute it to the ISCFP community and the FPNN network lists. And just remind you that in case you need an interview support, FPNN will be there to make sure that you get the support you need, resources and coverage ideas. Our content hub as FPNN seems to be way beyond what you actually meets the eye. So the briefing pages provide resources and past reporting for background and inspiration. So just to remind you as we're finalizing this conversation, it's about the COP 2028, and this is a pre-event towards that very event. It's happening, and this is the 28th annual UN Climate Change, Climate Conference, that serves as a formal meeting for parties to negotiate and agree on how to tackle climate change and reduce emissions and limit the global warming. I want to appreciate you so much for being here. It's already 6. Great thanks to Sono Aibe, the gender and climate expert, who shared about the link between climate change and sexual and reproductive health. Great thanks to Nandita Bajaj, the executive director, population balance, and the senior lecturer at Antioch University. She gave us context about population, climate change, and reproductive rights. And then we had Sadia Rahman, the youth advocate for SRHR and climate change, who gave us the youth engagement in climate solutions and more. My name is Andrew Kyamegero, and I can't thank you enough. My key request for each and every one of you here today is kindly go on social media and find FPNN, follow FPNN, so that you get the daily updates as and when these are happening. Not forgetting one thing, that tell your friends and family, your relatives, and whoever you actually know to be a part of this time. And again, we're doing this not just for our own selves, but for the humanity. Every time you have these conversations and realign with them, it will actually change the world to what we want to see. So from me and from the organizing team, great thanks to the media team that is the back end, making sure that this happens. The ones that are doing the heavy lifting, we can't thank you enough. Our dear experts that are coming from the different fields, thank you so much for the wisdom, the knowledge, and the vibrancy you've given us. Friends, this is a celebration of knowledge. It's a birth of awareness and the commitment to collaborative responsibility. We